Hey there, and welcome back to Tales of the Bunny Man by Zarek R on GameJolt, aka the Bunny Team. When I finished playing Tales of the Bunny Man, I knew that I had to make a video on this game's story because I really loved how this game told and interpreted the whole missing children's incident, so I just had to make a video on this. Your daughter's been missing for a month, along with other children you knew. Now, you're back at the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to prove your daughter's still here, alive, and to bring her back home. However, you must face the truth, no matter how heart-wrenching it may be. Since this game is clearly about the missing children incident, I wanted to make it clear that I'm trying to not rely on already known information about FNAF. So even though it's easy to fill in the blanks, I'm trying to let the game carry its interpretation of the story on its own as much as possible. With that said, spoiler warning and warning. This game contains the following: loud noises, flashing lights, imagery, jump scares, blood, mild swearing, crude / dark humor, and various other dark themes. Play at your discretion. It was once a place of joy. Kids would come and go every day. It doesn't matter how long it takes. I will have my daughter back. Night 1 takes place on December 15th, 1985. There aren't any phone calls that take place during the nights, so I'll briefly discuss some gameplay details before moving on. The game teaches you its mechanics through comics for each of the animatronics. If Bonnie knocks on the door, keep the door shut. If you hear Foxy running towards your office, hide in the gift box to your left until he leaves. If you see Foxy on one of the camera feeds, refresh the camera quickly. And once it's 6 a.m., it's time for you to go home and rest. After all, tomorrow is another day. Day 1, September 29th. Now, if I were to go over every piece of dialogue in this part of the game, we'd be here for way too long. So I'll do my best to summarize the main events of the day, cover important dialogue here and there, as well as some smaller details that are optional, so I'll try to refer to those from time to time if they're important to the story, or if they're just interesting overall. On the first day, you play as Jeremy, and you meet your friends at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza: Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, and Cassidy. Now, I've already mentioned before that our daughter went missing along with her friends, which is why we came to this restaurant in the first place in December. Our daughter is none other than Cassidy. Now, while the game hasn't explicitly said this yet, the game hints at this after reaching 6 a.m. for the first time, with a Fredbear plushie in the background, just like the Fredbear plushie that Cassidy's carrying on her head. You all decide to play hide and seek, and you count to 10. You start finding your friends one by one, meeting a bunch of people along the way. Some of these characters are references to short stories from the Fazbear Frights or Tales from the Pizzaplex books. You find Gabriel in front of the bathroom, but he isn't hiding. Here, we learn that Michael's been acting odd for a while, presumably due to someone's death, since Jeremy says that we'll never forget him and we are still his friends. Not only that, but Michael also feels regret for what happened. So, for some additional context, on the GameJolt page for Tales of the Bunny Man, you can find a series of character bios which help us understand what's happened in the game so far. When we read up on Michael and William Afton, we learn that Michael's guilt is due to the death of his younger brother, Kenny, who was friends with the other kids, especially Cassidy. It's also well known that the Aftons are friends to the families of some of the children, such as Cassidy's and Susie's. So now, we understand why Michael's acting this way. Back in the dining room, everyone's been found. But where are your parents? They've never been late before. You hear a whistle from behind in a dark room. You go to check it out, but the whistling stops, and now you're all alone. Jeremy's the first kid to go missing, and we know he won't be the last. Sheik is now added to the mix. If you hear her knock, keep the door shut. Day 2, October 7th. The kids are back at the restaurant, but Jeremy isn't here anymore. He's apparently on a trip with his parents. While Gabriel suspects that's not true, the kids go on to the arcade, while you, Susie, decide to check on Bonnie first. You can either follow the main path or visit some optional locations which can yield more information about the world in this game. For example, a girl named Isabella Avery heard Bonnie speak to her, which you find odd. Now apparently, Bonnie has been raking repeatedly now, but William won't let Henry investigate, and you don't know why. As you stare at the bunny, you find Bonnie staring back at you. Just plain creepy. You can go on to talk to a few people, like Fritz Baker, one of the only people Michael is comfortable with after Kenny's death. She doesn't seem to like Rita very much, describing her as a little unhinged. We also learn that Rita has some sort of relationship with William. We also talked with Roy Davis, who's watching over the prize corner. He found a tape in one of the plushies and gives it to you. This tape is dated July 25th, 1981, titled E. Murray Meeting. This is Edwin Murray, the person responsible for the Mimic program / endoskeleton in official FNAF. You can learn more about Edwin from the stories The Mimic and The Storyteller from the Pizzaplex books, if you're curious. William and Henry initially approached Edwin due to a, quote, living vacuum cleaner, but William's attention was caught by something else, though the transcript never catches the object's name. All we know is that the object is a mech built by Edwin for his son David. This mech is capable of learning from David and is considered a part of the family since they have developed a bond. This is when William got the idea to mass produce this technology, to have these creations bond with lonely children. Edwin rejects this notion, however, since the mech was initially created for David, especially since his mother had passed away. William refutes this, however, saying that his own son, Kenny, is lonely, constantly bullied by his brother, and his mother is too busy taking care of Elizabeth to give him any attention. He asks Edwin to give him the mech for the week, to see if Kenny will be able to bond with the creation, like David has. At the end, a children's drawing appears, a father carrying his son, who says, "Thanks, Dad," as he holds a red ball. I'll give a brief spoiler warning since this is a reference to the Mimic story in the Pizzaplex books, and I'll explain it briefly. This drawing is referencing David and his father Edwin. In the Mimic, unfortunately, David ends up dying after chasing a ball into the street when he's hit by a white van. So this is giving some context, I suppose, as to what happens after this meeting. However, considering how many references there are to the books, I don't think this is something that's super important for the rest of the story. I think it's just informing you, like, oh, it's just connecting to that part of the book. Now, when we return to Roy, we learn that Henry and William were shopping for patents in the early 80s, which explains why they approached Edwin for this living vacuum cleaner. We then head to Pirate's Cove and run into a man in a bunny costume, aka William Afton. He takes off the costume and starts talking to you. Now, William talks quite a bit about his family history, but for some reason doesn't like talking about his older sister, Elena. And while he normally doesn't talk about this kind of stuff with anyone, you are a bit of an exception. Afton also talks about the incident that Michael was responsible for, leading to Kenny's death, but despite this quote-unquote prank, Afton still loves him nonetheless, and he's proud of him, which is a weird way to describe this incident, considering, his son died as a result. He then goes on to explain his favorite thing about Freddy's, which I'll let him speak more on.
I think it has an aura. A mystical energy, maybe. If you believe in that sort of thing. To each their own, I would say. But I am glad you think the same. Actually, keep it a secret between you and I, but I think you and your friends are the ones to help with that. I will eternally thank you all for being a part of this.
More ominous foreshadowing, especially considering what's happened to Jeremy. Susie returns to the arcade, where the rest of her friends have been waiting. As they play the arcade, the Bunny Man watches from afar. Maybe this time, everyone's safe. Now we have Freddy, who adds some new mechanics to the game. He'll either try to shut off the power in the breaker room or wake up the puppet to do his dirty work by playing music. If he's in the breaker room, head in there and flash your light on him. If he's playing music, stop the music from playing through the cameras. Day 3, October 15th. Unfortunately, it's only the 3 of them now, and you, Fritz, want to visit Foxy. but not before talking with a bunch of different people. One odd interaction that you have here is with Balloon Boy. Yep, he's here now. Now normally, Balloon Boy responds with, or at least he's supposed to. When you ask Balloon Boy, "Who are you?" Balloon Boy says, "You know me." It's the only time he responds with an actual sentence, which catches Fritz off by surprise. We know that last week Bonnie was malfunctioning a lot, and ended up speaking to Isabella at one point, so maybe the same thing's happening here. Either way, it's not the response you'd want to hear from an animatronic boy who's only known for laughing. Another character we meet is Harry Mason, who reveals that the security guard, Vincent, has been drinking a lot recently, and as a result is more aggressive. We already know that Jeremy and Susie have both interacted with him before they went missing. Also, with regards to Foxy, everyone's saying that Foxy is on vacation for a while or just unavailable. Later on, when you go to the prize corner, you overhear a conversation between Fritz Baker, Roy Davis, and Jody Winstone. They're talking about who's responsible for the recent disappearances. Michael and Fritz Baker both think that it could be Rita. Jody, however, thinks that it could be Henry, who stopped showing up when his daughter died and only appears whenever a child goes missing. Roy disagrees with this, however, saying that Henry couldn't do anything like that. You finally head to Pirate's Cove, but don't find anything until you hear someone. It's the Bunny Man, but unaware, you head into the back of the cove. You find Foxy in the back, but also find something on the floor. If you pick up the paper, you learn about an incident that happened with Kenny and Fredbear, which led to Fredbear's decommission. This is pretty much the bite of 83 that they're talking about. This is probably connected to Kenny's death and Michael's guilt. Apparently, the establishment has been trying to find a replacement for some time, considering characters such as Pop Goes the Weasel, Rosie Porkchop, Sparky the Dog, and etc. While Ned Bear and Freddy Fazbear were also possible replacements, William wanted a purple bunny in a suit to go along with them. However, the writer of these pages tried to go against this and resulted in getting William angry. As a result, Freddy and Bonnie both got introduced to their establishment later on. The pages suggest that Henry is most likely the writer because he was the only one with any authority to go against one of William's ideas, as opposed to a subordinate. We also learned that Foxy was originally named Roberto Foxy, a character designed by Michael. William also proposed a farm of some kind, but didn't seem sincere, and Henry thinks that William was trying to throw shade at someone, maybe his older sister Elena. As for why though, it's not clear. And now it's confirmed that Henry is the writer, with the mention of his daughter's death, and he even acknowledges the disappearances on the 11th of October 1985, just a few days ago. Apparently, someone named Emmett Tucker, another book reference, has been convicted, but Henry's not convinced. He believes that whoever's caused Susie and Jeremy's disappearances is the same person who killed Charlotte, and he's determined to find them. Once you're done reading, you hear another voice. That makes 3 children now, and nobody knows who could have done it. Now we have Balloon Boy joining us, and he'll be constantly trying to shut off the power in the break room like Freddy, so if you hear him in there, just shine the light on him to scare him away. October 23rd. Gabriel is at the restaurant, but without anyone knowing. You need to find out what's happened to your friends. You head to the prize corner and find the puppet, one of the most trustworthy characters. The puppet gains your trust and wanders around for a bit, and when it returns, you start to look at the plushies. You reminisce about your friend's favorite animatronics for a bit. When you look at the hanging doll, you realize that it's from the place where Afton and Edwin made some sort of deal. These plushies were meant to learn with other kids by mimicking their actions. An interesting detail about this interaction is that while you're talking about the plushies, the puppet has a sort of aggressive reaction, or at least they look pretty angry when you're talking about them, with the appearance of green eyes behind the sockets. Before you leave, you realize that Roy isn't here, and since he's never missed a day of work, you figure he's probably not going to be coming back anytime soon. As you and the puppet head into the hallway, you find Afton talking with someone, and you start to eavesdrop on the conversation. So, I'm going to be a substitute? I think I'm too young for this.
Come on, Faraday, you can do this. I trust you. You're already all grown up.
Dad, I'm like 19, and I still don't feel like I moved on from you know what.
It was an accident. When growing up, slip-ups might happen. That's how it is. You have to move on from it. Sometimes, son, things just go missing.
The puppet stares back at William in what appears to be fear. A girl's face faded in the background, a spirit that's inhabiting the puppet. The puppet grabs a hold of you and whisks you away to the prize corner, hiding you in a gift box. If only you got away so easily. However, it was not enough. Look at the hanging doll in this scene. Right as the puppet arrives and is about to hide you, the doll starts looking in your direction before returning to their natural state. Looks like these plushies are more alive than what they seem. You wake up, trapped in what appears to be Freddy. As you look around, Bonnie and Chica slowly turn their head towards you, and you can see the Bunny Man in the distance. He gets closer and closer. Bonnie and Chica's eyes go missing, and the Bunny Man stands right in front of you. That's 4 children down, and now Cassidy's all alone. Of course, we also know that William was responsible for the death of another girl, a girl that now possesses the puppet. It's safe to say that this girl is Charlotte, Henry's daughter, who died before all the rest. Fearful of seeing history repeat, she tries to save Gabriel from the same fate she suffered, but it was futile because he's always watching. Our final character, Fredbear, joins us, who mimics the behavior of the other animatronics. Essentially meaning that you have to treat Fredbear a lot like the others. He'll sometimes knock on the door, go in the break room, or play music. And now our final night has passed, and it is now day 5, October 31st. Cassidy's by the stage, all alone now, desperate to find out what happened. Your father used to work here, but ended up being fired by William. Unfortunately, nobody's seen your friends, and soon the Halloween party will start. You plan on dressing up as a ghost. You're then reminded of your plushie, and you're not sure where you left it. You end up finding it in the hallway, but you're not sure how it got there, especially since it's standing on its own. Before you try and pick it up, it runs away. However, before you're able to go after it, you run into Rita and William, and overhear a conversation between the two. William's having trouble with Elizabeth, who's trying to cope with the disappearance of her friends. Talk about ironic. You continue looking for the plushie, which leads you to the bathroom. You overhear a conversation between Agatha and Stain, some of the maintenance workers for the animatronics. Some of Fredbear's spring locks have gone missing, and they don't know why. Cassidy interrupts them, trying to get to the plushie, but once they leave, it runs off again. You reach the stage trying to get to the plushie, before you're interrupted by Henry. Henry's been having a rough time of it lately. He's recently lost his son Sammy in divorce proceedings, on top of all the recent news happening, along with the death of his daughter before that. Even so, he's still trying to prepare for the reintroduction of Fredbear. Not sure if that's the best idea, considering the past. Before leaving though, Henry warns you to stay away from strangers. Once again, you follow the plushie, but this time to parts and service. If you look towards the left, you'll find one of the endoskeletons, which you find a bit creepy. Afterwards, you check under the table, finding the Fredbear plushie. You can't help but wonder why or how it moves. Until...
Oh, Cassidy! Oh, Cassidy!
Do you think it's an issue with the air cylinders? There's nothing wrong with the show controls. It'd be nice if we could take even just one of them to the back to see what's wrong, but he's just not letting us. I know that it's important to have them all here today, but we should be allowed to take some time to make sure they fucking work. Do you think maybe a rat got into them and chewed stuff up, and then went into Bonnie and died? What? Bonnie's starting to smell funny. It's always rats, Agatha. Always rats. That's kind of a pretty big problem, Stain. Having rats in a restaurant isn't exactly smiled upon. Cassidy's plushie is one of the mimicking plushies mentioned earlier. According to Cassidy's bio, from the Game Jolt page once again, psychic friend Fredbear would watch as Cassidy and Kenny played together. We know from the audio tape that Susie listened to, William wanted the mimicking technology to bond with Kenny, and it looks like he got what he wanted. After Kenny's death though, you would end up keeping the plushie, having a piece of him with you always. I also wanted to briefly bring up this unsettling segment, which shows Afton essentially killing the kids one by one as he works up to his most desired target, Cassidy. As he kills each of the kids, he starts spelling out the word Cassidy, the name rather. Now, I want to mention this because eventually you see this TV that displays what looks like a code, but I can't for the life of me figure out what it is. So I don't know how significant that is, or if it's even supposed to be interpreted, but I have to imagine it is, because why else would you show random symbols on the TV screen? Even without that though, it's still an unsettling segment for sure. You return to Freddy Fazbear's as a ghost. In costume, of course. Everyone's dressed up, but unfortunately, someone has unfinished business.
Cassidy, you forgot something. You forgot me.
You're trapped in a suit, talking to the Bunny Man. Now this part of the game has a few dialogue options, so first I'll let you listen to the responses that the Bunny Man gives you in order. So option 1 response, then option 2, then option 3, and after each option I'll try and summarize as best as I can. So at first you can ask why me, and it was you. So first we have option 1.
The soul of Freddy's, the childhood wonder, the magic. I can't let it die. I can't let that happen, Cassandra.
The Bunny Man is making sure that the soul of Freddy's doesn't die by killing the children. Let's be honest, I don't think he's being very rational right now. Option 2.
I won't lie, I was low on options. First it was gonna be Henry, but I have other plans for him. Then that Andrew kid, but he would have never fit in the role. But then I remembered your little friend group. And you know what they say? It's all about symmetry in the end, my friend.
He ended up choosing you as his last victim because after killing you, he will have killed 3 boys and 3 girls, being Susie, Cassidy, and Charlotte. And finally, option 3.
The yellow rabbit is everyone's friend. I am one of them.
This seems to tie in with his delusional belief that killing the children is in service to Freddy's in some way. I don't think, at this point, William is very logical in why he's doing this. Which in general is a bit of a departure from William's current, character type in, official FNAF. We know, in the official FNAF, he's very logical, quote-unquote, about why he's doing, the murders and all that. But in this game, they go about William's reasoning in a more delusional way, I suppose. Now, our next set of prompts are, what about my family? Where the hell is my dad? And can I hear a story? Option 1.
Your father probably won't even worry about it. After a few bottles, it's only gonna be a bad nightmare to him. But don't worry, Freddy's is your new home, and we'll take good care of you.
And option 2.
Probably being horrible at his job. Why isn't he looking after you?
Options 1 and 2 are mainly used to insult your father, but option 3 is a lot more interesting.
Well, that's unexpected. Well, I suppose one last bedtime story wouldn't hurt. A little boy who loved to learn. He would learn anything he could. His father thought that his experiments were too much. But his mother just saw a normal boy. One day, the town was warned of a wild bear roaming the woods. Later that night, the boy waited until 12 a.m. so he could jump out of the window and catch the bear. A new friend after all, but his dad knew about it. The dad, ever sour with his emotions about the boy, didn't want the kid to be hurt after all. He got out his rifle and went to find the boy in the deep, dark woods in the cold, dark night. Every step had to be careful, every step had to be precise. But one wrong move, and the father was suddenly stuck in one of the boy's experiments. A bear trap. With that, he had to crawl back all the way home, only to be met by the sun and the bear. The fate left to the bear to decide.
I think this is a story about how Afton ended up killing his father one night after he was caught by a bear trap. He was left vulnerable to a bear in the woods, it seems, but the way that his story is phrased makes me wonder if the bear is really a bear or another invention of sorts, but I find it hard to believe that William would have been able to invent some sort of like bear animatronic at this point in time. Like usual, it's hard to tell how much of what Afton's saying is grounded in reality, which is why I mentioned the possibility that the bear is another one of William's inventions. After all, why else would he find William with the bear in the first place? Now, our final set of prompts are, fuck you, wow, did you see that, what am I in, and accept reality. Option 1.
Now that's just rude.
As if we didn't see that one coming. Option 2.
I'm not dumb. Charlie also tried to do that.
Safe to say how options 1 and 2 were going to end up. It's chilling to hear him say, though, that Charlie tried tricking Afton into looking away as well. Option 3.
Why, you're Fredbear, of course. But don't worry, it will fit like a glove. Even more so since the spring locks were removed from the costume. I'll try to add them into my own suit. After all, I am one of them.
I assume by this he means that he'll actually become one of the animatronics, but how exactly? Maybe it has something to do with Kenny's incident with Fredbear previously, since we know that Fredbear had spring locks at one point. And then option 4. Afton's caught by surprise, but nonetheless, your fate remains the same, no matter which option you choose. Finally, we're back in December 1985. You run through the hallway and run into Fredbear, who ends up attacking you. Cassidy? Is that really you? And so, the credits roll. 5 children gone missing over the course of a month, yours included, and in the end, not even you were spared. William's a twisted individual who's found a lot of joy over their deaths and gets away with it. Or did he? So, did you think that was it? The end of the tale? Of course not. There's still more to clue you in on. The Purple Man is a crooked fool and committed sins that he might regret. But to what extent? Hard to say. His apathy for the world around him was abundantly clear. But like any other sin, the consequences came. His life slowly became empty. The downfall of his family was caused by those actions. First, the fox boy that left its burrow, then the golden child that lost its shine. But worst of all, Freddy's was falling apart after being left alone. But then, they started appearing. Voices and figures that took the form of the very rotten beasts he created. He lived years of happiness. He got inspired to bring Freddy's out of obscurity even more. After some time, it became a one-man job, as his old partner wasn't there anymore. But those that would be his reset came. They were willing to die if that meant Freddy's return as a brand. Yet the Purple Man saw potential. But those who visited the man were thinking of a plan. With all those angry and hateful towards him in one place, they decided tonight would be the perfect time to corner their jailer. One final reunion. It's revealed that Vincent, the drunken security guard, is Cassidy's father, aka you during nights 1 through 5. You took the fall for Afton's crimes, which means that only the spirits can get their justice now. But the children weren't the only victims of this incident, as Henry goes on to take his own life, and is finally visited by his daughter, the puppet. Strangely though, Cassidy isn't here. On to gameplay mechanics. For Gabriel, if you hear him in your office, you must hide. Jeremy will either visit your office or head to the breaker room. If he's in the breaker room, you simply flash him. For Susie, you need to go on the kitchen camera and essentially refresh it to prevent her from attacking you. And finally, you need to locate Fritz on the cameras and refresh that camera as well. But despite their onslaught, you reach 6 AM. However, that's not the end. He finally found the suit that will become his tomb, the last lingering piece of his soul. It was right where he left it, a little raggedy with unfinished dreams, but that's exactly how he remembered it. He missed it so much. He missed being the Bunny Man so dearly. It was the prime of his life. As the phantoms of those long lost watched their killer's dying breath with glee, they knew it was never too simple. He was inside a killer suit, but they forgot that it was his killer suit. It was a part of him, one that he gladly enjoyed being, one that he wouldn't dare to give up again. As the spring locks caved in his flesh, he felt the joy of 1,000 men. He knew he would come back. He always would. He's a part of Freddy's melody, and one thing's for sure, a good song never dies. Becoming a part of something that filled him with such joy and ecstasy, even as the spirits watch him take his last breath. In official FNAF, Afton comes off as a more serious individual, and, it's believed that he killed children to extract remnant for them for his immortality experiments and to put his son back together. It's kind of hard to keep up with. Of course, Afton's first murder was different, more passionate since he was grieving the loss of his child, but for the most part, Afton's been very logical. At least, that's what he seemed to be. At least, that's what I understand from FNAF. It's a confusing series to keep up with, especially recently. In Tales of the Bunny Man, though, Afton is a lot more free-spirited, to say the least. Think about how he lured Fritz, how he surprised Cassidy, but let her run away. He even gloats about how Charlie tried to trick him before she dies. This was a man in his prime. Even as he was dyeing the suit, all he could think was about how much he missed wearing it, and how he didn't want to give it up again. He would become the Bunny Man once and for all. Everything about how he was portrayed made the missing children incident a lot more real in a way, a lot more dark. At least as real as a video game could get anyways. Even in the character bio for William, it stated that he doesn't kill Charlotte because of jealousy towards Henry or some sort of argument. It was all because the opportunity was there. So in the end, even his first murder was a result of, Afton saw the chance and he took it. This contrast really intrigued me because I never thought of Afton as this sort of character who was just a murderer for the sake of wanting to do so, like wanting to kill people because it brought him joy. I always saw Afton for, despite all his sick actions, he somehow had a logical, quote-unquote, reason behind it, with regards to science and all that. And especially because of how the voice actor portrayed William, I just knew I had to make a video on this game. Now, even though we've covered most, if not all, of the main points at this point, there are still a few questions that remain regarding Cassidy, Elena, the spirits, Afton's own motivations to some degree, but I think you could still chalk that down to him being more delusional rather than logical. There's still questions to ask about why Balloon Boy has that one weird, line of dialogue where he actually says a sentence, which, we don't really see him do at all in the game. But despite all those questions, and even more of course, I think I've managed to grasp the general story throughout the game, right? Because again, it is about the missing children, and Afton's pretty much progression as he kills each of the children. And while we did cover the main game now, there's a lot of side information on the characters through the games page, which I've mentioned for the most part, as well as the extras in game. Now, normally you unlock extras after night 5, so I could have brought it up earlier, but there was a few hidden sections that are only available to you after completing the epilogue, which is why I held off until now to mention it. The first section is a series of secret pages written by William, documenting each time the spirits first visited him. The first spirit that visits him is Jeremy, and the page is dated September 26, 1988. Now I wanted to mention that I think this might be a mistake, because later on, Afton goes on to say that the spirits were visiting him 3 years after their deaths on the same date. So we know Jeremy actually disappears on the 29th of December. As a result, I think that this note was supposed to be dated September 29th, and it was just a little mistake. Now, of course, Jeremy visits him, but he doesn't appear as a kid. Unmistakable to my waking and wondering mind, it was my Bonnie, a cruder Bonnie with a sickly aura around him. The smell of death combined with the gloom of a reaper, I instantly knew this was a punishment, a raven, but my Bonnie should know this is a gift. Once again, he can't help but feel childlike excitement at the thought of Jeremy visiting him, and he expected the others to pop by soon. On October 7th, Susie shows up in the form of Chica. She's not alone though, as the spirit of her dog was attached to her. As if this wasn't tragic enough, it seems like he killed her dog along with her. Now, it would take too much time to describe all of these pages in detail, so I encourage you, if you want, to pause and read through these, because they help give more insight into Afton's state of mind, even as ghosts are visiting him. And you could say that because we play as William in the epilogue, even though he's trying to survive against them, there's a good chance he was actually enjoying himself throughout the entire night. So, that definitely paints things in a darker picture, to say the least. Like clockwork, Fritz now visits him on the anniversary of his death, the 15th of October. Even as Fritz vaguely threatens him with the song Fear the Reaper, in Afton's mind, he knows he was the real Reaper, since he obviously killed the kids. On October 23rd, Gabriel visits the basement, but Afton's been anticipating this one because he wants to prove whether the spirits are actually there or are just a figment of his twisted imagination. He tried to take a picture of them, but it turned out to capture just gray noise. It doesn't matter though, because on the 31st, his most anticipated visitor will soon return. Halloween was here, and the whole crew arrived, except for Fredbear. She's the only one who never showed up. He doesn't really worry about this too much though. All he had to do now was introduce Rita to the band. And of course, we see here a photograph of what appears to be a Halloween celebration. But while Afton and the band are drawn on top of it, there is a little boy, with their eyes crossed out on the bottom. This is probably Kenny Afton, who died after his incident with Fredbear. After these pages, we see figures of both Spring Bonnie and Fredbear, the plush versions, the mimic ones. Now after this, we have Memories, which is essentially a rundown of Afton's past throughout his childhood and adolescence. The first photo, for example, shows a photo of him and Elena, the sister he seems to not be fond of. Now for context, Rita is showing Vanessa, William's daughter, a photo album filled with memories, such as Afton's childhood with Elena. Now, for a bit, I was wondering whether Cassidy and Elena had enough of a resemblance to explain why maybe William was so specific about targeting Cassidy, but that didn't really go anywhere because, to be honest, a lot of the characters start looking similar after a bit if you have them all in black and white, so there's really no point in doing so. Now, oddly enough, a lot of the photos as you go through like the farm, then like one of the fall fests, I believe, at some point, we actually start seeing William's face, which is weird since we don't see it during 1985. Now, one of the photos shows that Afton was a troubled boy when he first moved to his town, and so Elena gave him a very familiar carved rabbit mask. Rita also mentions that Afton's dad wasn't around as much, something that William and Vanessa have in common, suggesting that William's not around either. Now, this could be because maybe the explanation of the photo album is taking place after 1993, which is when Afton gets trapped in the suit. And then we have the final photo, which shows Rita and Vanessa having a picnic with a Spring Bonnie plushie on the floor, though it has a weird pink eye now. But you can tell it's the same plushie as the one shown in the extras, and presumably the one in the game in general, because you can see this tear by the waist that matches the plushie in the extras. And then finally, Rita says to Vanessa, "Sounds a lot like you, Vanessa. Maybe you were meant to be." Now, I think in a lot of ways, this is pointing reference to how Vanessa in FNAF canon, right, goes on to be Vanny. And also, this is kind of mixing in with how Vanessa is William's daughter, like in the FNAF movie. So, you know, there are a few ways you can take this for sure. And part of that is because they seem to have a few similarities, according to Rita anyway. Now, considering that we haven't talked about Rita that much in this video, it's worth considering that since she's in a relationship with William, how much does she really know about what happened? Does she know that William actually was responsible? My theory is that she is in the know because in the secret pages section, William mentions on Halloween that he has to introduce Rita to the band. Obviously, he's referring to the spirits in this case, so I imagine if he's going to do something like that, then Rita on some level knows or is about to know that William was the one who killed those children. We also know that Rita was suspected to have been involved by Michael and Fritz Baker. So one has to wonder, you know, how much was she really involved? Does she have a part in Susie's disappearance specifically, since that's the only disappearance that we actually didn't witness? We just know it happened. It's definitely a possibility. Now, this helps us understand a bit more about Afton's life growing up, but it doesn't lend any insight into why he has a negative relationship with Elena at all. And if anything, the photo album suggests that they had a good relationship by the way that they had positive interactions and the fact that Elena gave William a bunny mask as a gift. So given those details, it's hard to imagine why William later on in 1985 doesn't like talking about Elena, and why even Henry suggests that William doesn't like Elena either. It's one of those weird story elements that isn't actually concluded at all in the game. So I don't know if it's significant or if it's part of world building. At first, while I was writing the script, I pondered the idea that Cassidy looked like Elena in some way, right? They look kind of similar. That's what I was thinking, and maybe that's why William wanted to kill Cassidy so much. But now, we've covered everything in game and, you know, talked about some things outside the game that ties into the main story. By far, this is one of the most chilling ways I've seen the missing children incident be described, mainly because you play as the children themselves during the daytime segments, so, you're the one getting kidnapped. And, especially during their final moments, you see what happens to them, with the exception of Susie, pretty much. Also, the voice actor and the writing for Afton goes a long way into portraying this as well, so great job to them. Besides that, though, other details such as Afton's family being friends with the families of the missing children makes it a lot more ominous that, William was able to do this and was willing to do this, right? He had a connection with these families, even if, especially in cases where Cassidy was a friend of his own son, Kenny. My best theory on why Cassidy was the one that William anticipated killing the most, or was like his very desired target, we know he said symmetry, but I don't think that's the only reason. I think probably the biggest reason is because despite, aside from the other kids, Cassidy's the one that had the biggest connection to Kenny, right? And I mean, we know that Cassidy literally had the Mimic plushie that I have to assume Afton was able to monitor her from, which is really creepy to think about. But I think because of Cassidy's connection with Kenny, it made killing her that much more enticing to him in the end, which is just, again, very chilling to think about. But overall, this game is probably one of my favorite fan games now, thanks to its portrayal of Afton and the missing children incident overall. But of course, with all that said, I hope you did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Lets me know you're enjoying the content and want to see more of it, especially videos like this. The game will be in the description below as always. Great job to the Bunny team, to everyone, the voice actors, the writers, the developers in general. What an unexpected hidden gem, I think. I was not expecting this game to capture my attention the way it did. So yeah, with that said, I'll see you in another video. Take care.